It's about 6 o'clock. I know the roads are pretty icy, and those that are going to get here are going to get here. And so I asked the candidates if they're ready to start. Before we start, I do want to introduce the superintendent of schools, Matt Laundrie, is going to say a few welcoming words. Matt.
I love you applaud when I haven't even said anything yet, so I really appreciate that. But just very briefly, welcome to Rolland-Warner Middle School. Lapeer Community School is very happy to host this evening's forum. Special thanks to our candidates for availing themselves this evening. Campaign season in February is always unique, right? So we appreciate their availability. Also, special thanks to Judge Nicoloca for agreeing to serve as our moderator this evening. Always a great job in entertaining the mood, so thanks to that. But great opportunity to hear about some of the educational issues that our candidates will be confronted with solving at some point in the state legislature. So a majority of our questions this evening do have to do with the educational realm, although there are some tangential questions I think that you'll be able to address. And we also have an opportunity, if you so choose, we do have some cue cards and pencils at the table when you first walk in over here. If you have a question or two that you would like to ask a candidate who you feel was not asked this evening in the course of our questioning, just seek me out, hand me that card, and I'll be more than happy to take a look at it and see if it's an appropriate question for the candidate. So welcome to Lapeer, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Yep. Before we get started, I know many of you were at the Tea Party Forum, but let me read you kind of the rules that we're going to be using here this evening. At this point in time, we all know the candidates. We have Margaret Guerrero, we have Ms. Spilker, we have Mr. Howell. Each candidate is going to be allowed an opening statement not to exceed 2 minutes. The candidates have agreed that the order the name tags or the signs are listed, that's the way they're going to go this evening. All the questions are going to be asked by me. The candidates will be allowed up to 90 seconds to answer each question. And if necessary, I don't want to get into the debate like we did on Saturday, there could be a 30-second rebuttal. In other words, if in the answer somebody takes one of the other candidates' name in vain, then we do that. Hopefully, that didn't happen a couple weeks ago. I don't think it's going to happen now. The questions are going to be collected by Mr. Laundrie, and we're just going to try to screen them. We're going to try to concentrate on the educational format. And at the end, each candidate will be allowed 3 minutes for closing statements, and it'll be in reverse order of the opening. So we're going to start with the opening with Margaret. Closing is going to be with Mr. Howell. The only other thing I want to mention is we have a lady sitting there in the front row. She does have big signs that have the times on there, and we're going to try to enforce those pretty readily. And one of the other rules that we have here, which is something a little bit different than was at the other place, each candidate may bring one 8.5 by 11 sheet of reference notes for use during the forum. There will be paper and writing utensils provided for note-taking during the forum. Campaign material may be placed on a designated table near the room entrance, and the use of audio and video equipment other than what's sanctioned by the school district is not allowed. So, other than one sheet of paper, Margaret.
So I have a question. So we can't bring our sheets that have statistics and actual data?
Right now, the rules, as I am reading them on the sheet, which hopefully these rules were sent out to you, so you could see them, you may bring one 8.5 by 11 sheet of reference notes for use during the forum. So if you have one sheet of whatever statistics, or whatever you have, you can certainly have those, but everything else, hopefully you can close that, put it on the floor, or give it to one of your aides. So those are the rules. I think everybody is clear on that. Are you ready, Margaret?
Yep.
All right. So I do want to introduce this Margaret Guerrero DeLuca, who's going to be giving a 2-minute opening statement.
Okay. Hi, my name is Margaret Guerrero DeLuca, and I'm a Democrat. But I'm more than a party affiliation. I'm the wife of a 26-year veteran police officer who is also a proud union steward. I'm a mother to a first and third grader, and a parent who is extremely concerned with the hostility our current leaders have shown to both our educators and our education system. I'm a former mayor of Rolland City who consistently championed growth in my community. I'm a former senior manager for Pressure Financial where I manage multi-million-dollar portfolios, as well as large departments of over 50 employees. I am currently a substitute teacher for Lapeer County and have had the privilege to sub in every district within our county. I am more than a political affiliation. I am a citizen of Lapeer County who is tired of the people's voices being ignored in Lansing by those that we have elected to represent us. I'm a taxpayer who is fed up with the financial irresponsibleness decisions being made by so-called leaders who fail to use due diligence nor common sense. I'm a public servant, a community activist, and a leader. I want to be your next state representative. I will represent all of the citizens of Lapeer County, regardless of party lines. I have proven time and time again at each of these forums that I am the candidate that truly understands the issues that are affecting Lapeer County and our state. I'm asking for your vote on March 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. And as before, there's to be no applause. This is not a rally, it's a forum.
Mr. Conrad, it's echoing terribly out here. Is it echoing out there as well? I could hardly understand what Margaret said.
Yeah, we're gonna, well, I think if you hold the microphone a little bit farther away, it might be better. I don't know if we have the audio-visual gentleman who's here who may be able to adjust it.
It doesn't have to do with the multiple microphones like feeding off each other.
I don't believe so. I think you can turn on the just stay back a little bit. The slow, yeah, why don't you keep it there and don't, you can stand if you like, but maybe if you sit.
I can sit, that's fine.
You may proceed, Ms.
So my name is Tracy Spilker. I'm a former state of Michigan employee. I worked for the Department of Human Services for about 7 years, initially as a welfare caseworker, and then I transferred over to Children's Protective Services in investigating abuse and neglect until I resigned at the end of 2013. So I have knowledge of, how our government passes these policies, but then they don't actually get enacted or enforced the way that they would like them to. They spend a lot of time in Lansing thinking about the way things should be, but unfortunately, that's not the way it actually works. The other thing I can say about myself is I have a Master's of Science in Clinical Behavioral Psychology, so that means that I am educated in the actual formal process of shaping human behavior, which is what government seeks to do, correct? I think it would be useful to have someone up in Lansing with these legislators telling them, listen, you have to understand how this is actually going to play out in the real world, how the way people are going to react, how that's going to affect human behavior. I'm a mother of a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, so children and education is very important to me. Children in general, like I said, I worked for CPS. I currently work as a case manager for mental health services. I do coordination of care, and I would approach, if I was, elected to the House of Representatives, I would approach it in the same manner where I basically do coordination of care. I link people together, get them on the same page, share information, build support systems, get access to resources, do research, things like that. And I would turn to you in our community to get you involved as much as possible. So that's pretty much sums it up.
Thank you. Now, I think the sound was a little bit better. Everybody agree? I think if you kind of sit back here and they can hear you. The next candidate is Mr. Gary Howell.
Thank you. My name is Gary Howell. I'm the Republican candidate for state representative in the district. First, I want to thank all the voters of Lapeer County that were kind enough to vote for me last November and give me this nomination and this honor to be here tonight. I want to congratulate Margaret on her large victory in the Democratic primary and congratulate Tracy for stepping forward as Libertarian candidate. When you're deciding who should be your next state representative, you need to know who that person is and why they are running. I've been a part of this community for many, many decades, and I can tell you that I have a sincere desire to serve the public. That desire began a long time ago when I joined the United States Army during the Vietnam War. I volunteered, ended up serving on the DMZ in Korea. While I was over there, my father passed a petition to get me elected Republican precinct delegate in 1970, and I've been involved ever since. Locally, my primary involvement as a volunteer public servant has been in the field of education. I served a number of years on the North Branch School Board, most of those years as the president of the board, and I've been on the Intermediate School District Board of Education for Lapeer County for the last 18 years. so I'm deeply involved in educational issues. Also, when I got out of the Army before I started law school, I taught public school for a year. I was a government economics teacher in the Carmen-Ainsworth district for a year, so I have some appreciation for what teachers go through. I think it matters who supports the candidates you're looking at. I'm pleased to tell you that I've been endorsed by the Michigan Association of School Administrators and the Michigan Elementary and Middle School Principals Association. Beyond that, the Farm Bureau, the Chamber of Commerce, the Small Business Association, National Federation of Independent Businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a list of pre-screened questions that are going to be primarily with educational issues. First question this evening to you, Ms. Guerrero de Luca. There are significant headwinds facing public school districts across the state, including declining enrollment and skyrocketing legacy costs. What is one specific solution you could offer to fix any of the state's many challenges in regards to the things I just mentioned?
Well, as you said, education is facing many, many issues. They've been facing many issues over the last several years. One of the ways that we need to do is we need to put our money where our mouth is. We say that education is a top priority in the state. Then we need to put our money where our mouth is, and we need to properly fund our schools. We need to ensure that we are not forcing our school boards and our school administrators each year that they do the budget to sit down to figure out what they're going to cut next in order to continue this. So we need to get our funding in order. You know, when proposal A was first put into place, and we had our sales tax and so on, and we were going to fund our schools, well, we never took into consideration what happens when the economy tanks. What happens when people aren't out there spending, and that sales tax fund is going smaller and smaller. So we need to come up with viable ways to properly fund our schools. We need to start thinking outside of the box, because the ways that we were doing it in the past is not working. They're not working. The schools are not getting the funds that they need. The legacy costs are going to continue to go up. That's inevitable. So the money that the state said that they recently gave the schools over the last 4 years, guess what? It didn't go to the school districts for resources and books. It did go to cover legacy costs. So again, we need to re-look at how we are currently funding our schools, whether it's through our sales tax or through Proposal A in general, and determine if this is truly the best way that we can do this now.
Thank you. Ms. Spilker?
I am absolutely in favor of like schools of choice, parents having the opportunity to educate their child however they see fit. I don't think that the government should be involved in like forcing parents to send their children to school if they don't want to. I mean, it's your child. You're responsible for educating that child in whatever manner you think is proper. And it's not for the government to determine how you educate your own child. And I think that we need to pull away from the state government running so many things. I don't think that the people understand we understand, but I don't think you really grasp it if you haven't been there and watched it happen, that they just hemorrhage money. And it's all a matter of CYA and act like you've done it, and none of it is really done efficiently or properly. And so we need to pull away and make it local. You know, do it within our own communities, that we set up our own schools and run them ourselves how we see. We're the local people here in this community, that it should be our choice. It's our kids going to the school. It shouldn't be Lansing telling us what we have to do down here. They don't know our community.
Thank you. Mr. Hollis, same question, please.
Yes, the question is, name one thing to improve the financial situation for schools. And the one thing I think we need to do is deal with the legacy costs. You can see the headlines right now about the city of Detroit and the Detroit Public Schools. They're going bankrupt because of their incredible overhead of debt and legacy costs. We don't want that to happen statewide. What I'd like to see the legislature do is step forward, increase their contribution into the legacy costs to reduce the burden on the local districts. As every school board member and administrator in the audience knows, we are now paying way over 20% of our payroll just to cover legacy costs. That's got to come down to provide money available for K-12 education. So that would be my approach, would be to increase the money going toward the legacy cost to reduce that burden on the local districts.
Thank you. Next question to you, Ms. Spilker. There are many in Lansing and throughout the state that believe Proposal A is no longer adequate to meet the funding needs of school districts across the state. With so many pressing issues facing the state's general fund and school aid fund, what should school funding look like into the future?
I'm gonna sound like a broken record. I think that we need to pull out it needs to be funded locally within each community. I think that we need to step out from, we've become so dependent on going to the state. And like, for instance, at the last forum, I remember you kept saying about how there's a drain pipe that needs to be moved, and we're just helpless to do it. We've come to this sort of sense of learned helplessness that we just can't do it. They said no, and that's why I feel, again, a broken record, we need to pull out, we need to make it local, we need to stop being dependent. It's time to sort of shake hands in whatever way, or enact legislation that will take the state's power away from running our lives here locally, that we will do this here in our own communities, and just say, it's nice doing business, but we're going to part ways and handle this on our own, because they've been doing, it's a mess. It's a disaster. So,
Mr. Howell?
Proposal A is an incredibly complex arrangement. The problem has been that when we hit the recession, our property values plummeted. When they plummeted, our taxable values plummeted. And what has happened is there's a cap. When they plummet down, they can only increase the rate of inflation, or 5%, whichever is greater each year. Inflation's been very, very low. So it's not going to repair itself, unfortunately. The taxes were up here, they went down like this, and incrementally they're going to increase very, very, very slowly. That's the fundamental problem we've got now. I don't foresee a lot of change in Proposal A. That is a constitutional amendment adopted by the voters of the state of Michigan. It's not something the legislature can change willy-nilly. I think the one thing we could do is we could give local districts the authority to propose millages to enhance their local education. But beyond that, I don't think you're going to see a large amount of money coming out of Lansing. Let's face it, we got the Detroit schools that need almost $750 million. Nobody knows the price tag in Flint. The economy is not going great guns. They promised money for roads they didn't appropriate. So I'm not going to sell you a bill of goods. It's not going to be easy to get more money out of Lansing.
Thank you. Ms. Guerrero DeLuca, same question, please.
Well, we keep hearing it's our Constitution, we can't change our Constitution. But as we've seen in the last 5 years, our state leaders have changed our Constitution when it deems necessary, such as the senior pension tax. So we can do that if we make smart decisions. Proposal A, as was mentioned, yes, it was created in 1994, and it was then at that time to relieve the tax burden on people paying property taxes to their local areas. And they didn't take into effect, again, everything that happens with the economy and with property taxes, so on. So it definitely needs reform. We need to look at ways that we can do it more smart and more efficient. Also in Prop A, half the people don't know that there's 50 hold harmless school districts in Prop A, that because they were paying above the level of the $6,655 in 1994, they still can generate revenue from their local properties. So our wealthy districts are exempt from this. So when we're talking about equality, it was created for equality. It's not equality. Payments are still $1,000 a part, from $7,000 to $8,100. And then these hold harmless districts are getting $11,000 to $15,000. So again, Prop A definitely needs to be relooked at.
Thank you. Next question to you, Mr. Howell. With many public school districts, including Detroit Public Schools, are on the brink of bankruptcy, do you believe school districts struggling with their finances, like DPS, should be taken over by a state emergency manager? And what recommendations would you make to avoid state takeover of school districts?
Well, it's kind of late in the game to ask that question about Detroit. Governor Granholm appointed an emergency manager over 10 years ago. There have been subsequent emergency managers. Detroit's been chaotic. They have had 10 superintendents in a period of 7 years down there. No school district could operate in that kind of a situation. Detroit, Flint, a few other cities are fairly unique in that they are in dire financial straits through a combination of factors, not the least of which is mismanagement at the local level. We do not face that in Lapeer, in North Branch, and Imlay City. We've been prudent with our money. We've been tight budgets. It's been a challenging time for us, but we are in no danger of being taken over by the state. Whether or not there ought to be takeovers depends on the situation. If a district is in such financial trouble it cannot operate, then there isn't much choice but to appoint a financial manager of some kind.
Thank you. Ms. Guerrero De Luca, same question, please.
Absolutely not. Should state emergency managers take over school districts? Absolutely not. Public vote, 2014, PA4 was voted overwhelmingly by the majority of citizens to do away with emergency managers altogether, whether in schools or in municipalities. And guess what? Our voices were ignored, as I mentioned earlier. They went in within 30 days after the voters decided to repeal this law, and they changed it. They changed some semantics and some verbiage, and they passed it anyways. So no, emergency managers should not come into local school districts. We continue talking about keeping local control. Well, local control is keeping your school boards, your elected officials, the ones that you're electing to make these financial decisions, in control of what's happening. And again, it is not due to careless spending. You know, we keep saying, oh, teachers are paid too much, or you're spending too much in resources. That's not the truth. And I sub in every district in this county, and I've seen the prudency that's happening in these schools. So that's definitely not the case. So emergency managers should not be in there. School districts should be able to review their own budgetary needs. But again, it comes back to proper funding. When you're getting money taken away from you consistently, what do you do?
Thank you. Ms. Spilker, same question, please.
No, I don't believe that the state should be coming in and running our lives here on a local level. Again, like what I was trying to say is that it's so massive, that this job that they have taken on, not just in the Department of Education, but everything. There's Department of this, Bureau of that, agency of this, and there's all these complex policies, like Carrie said. And what happens is they write this legislation, and then someone says, oh, well, that's not right, there's this, we have to consider this circumstance or this exception of the rule. So then they alter it a little bit, and it becomes so convoluted and difficult. And it's like, I just want to take out the middleman, wholesale government. Let's simplify it, keep it local here where we're running things for ourselves. Rather than like when I work for the state, where we want to do something here in our local office, so we have to send it up to this person and that person and this person, up to Lansing and then all the way back down to get umpteen signatures and reviews of someone who's 100 miles away that has no idea what's going on in our local area. I mean, it's ridiculous. We should be able to decide these things for ourselves. We know what is best for our own community.
Thank you. Next question to you, Ms. Guerrero De Luca. A 2010 study conducted by a professor at the Education Policy Center at Michigan State University concluded that school district consolidation makes fiscal sense, particularly in rural and small districts. Given the loss of nearly 250,000 students in Michigan and losses here in Lapeer County, do you think district consolidation is something that should be pursued?
To force a school district to consolidate should never be the state's option or right. If the school board in that local community school district deems it necessary based off the loss of students or the loss of property taxes or the loss of funding and so on, then yes, that's up to that local school district. But it should be something that our state comes in and says, because you have lost X amount of students or because you've lost X amount of funding, we're going to automatically consolidate you. No, it's not. And again, it goes back to local control. It has to be locally controlled. The parents, the teachers, the administrators, the school boards, those are the individuals that school districts are a cornerstone in every community. And I can't imagine any of our communities, whether in our county or any of our local counties, would want to lose a school district. And people fight for the school districts because they know it is it's a cornerstone in your community. So it should be looked upon by the existing boards as the last result.
Thank you. Ms. Spilker?
That's basically, I agree with her on that, is that it's, you know, it's a local thing, it should be managed, it can't be managed properly from afar. And again, we know our own districts, and I mean, as a libertarian, I'm not a big fan of taxation. I think we should keep our own dollars and spend them as we choose in our own communities, rather than, you know, none of us consented to being taxed. This was something that was set up before we were ever born, and they just take it from us, and we have no say. It doesn't matter how we vote. They turn around and do what they want to do anyways. I mean, so if I was sent to Lansing, I would be expressing these views that we need to just let people run their own lives.
Mr. Hollis, same question, please.
Yes, there's a middle ground on this issue. I'm certainly opposed to forced consolidation. If the district wants to vote to consolidate, that's fine. But there's a much better solution, and it's being used right here in Lapeer County. At the ISD, we work cooperatively to work with the various districts to share costs. Imlay City, Dryden, and Almont for a number of years have shared costs on special education programs. Right now, Imlay City and Dryden are sharing a superintendent, which is an excellent idea. There's a lot of things. Transportation can be shared. You can retain local control, but at the same time, you can achieve the economies of scale you need to properly serve your students. So there's a way to do this without abolishing local control, but also gaining the financial advantage we need to gain to make sure our students get the best possible education they can get.
Thank you. Next question to you, Ms. Spilker. One facet of last year's Proposal 1 initiative would have modified the allowable uses of the school aid fund to exclude higher education, but to include public community colleges, career and technical education programs, and affiliated scholarships. Do you think these entities should be funded with school aid fund dollars?
I think everything should basically be privatized, because when it's run by the government, it's just a disaster. And I mean, for instance, like with college loans, you know, there's plenty of evidence to show that the government giving out college loans is actually what's driving up the cost of college tuition. And it's just, we could do it, again, I'm a broken record, we could do it so much more efficiently at a local level if we kept the money in our own pockets and decided for ourselves within our own communities how it should be spent. We can decide for ourselves what types of schools we wanted, what sort of curriculum we want for our children. I think that there needs to be less focus on assessment and teaching to the test. You know, what they're asking us to do in the schools is, with the kids, they're not looking at how it's creating an environment that's not actually conducive to learning a lot of times, because the teachers are so stressed out about, I gotta do this, this task to that task, that the kids, it's overwhelming for them to even be able to accomplish what they're expected to accomplish. Also, when the textbook makers don't want to create new textbooks that are in line with the Common Core, it's just a mess. I just would rather see us run it ourselves.
Thank you. Mr. Hollis, same question, please.
Proposal A was Proposal 1.
Yes.
Was a particularly unfortunate proposal. It was dressed up as a road proposal. It had 100 other things in it. The schools were part of it. It had no chance of passage. I don't know why they authorized it in Lansing. It was a waste of time, money, and effort. But in terms of what you're talking about specifically, I don't have any problem with taking some school aid fund money for community colleges, vocational education, things like that are an integral part of the high school program. I would not be supportive of using school aid funds for universities. I think that ought to come out of different funding. But more and more you're finding a transition zone between high school and community college, where there's a lot of shared credit, a lot of shared classes. At Ed Tech, we've got a program for a bachelor's or a associate's degree after 3 years, junior year, senior year, and 1 year of college. So a lot of that is pretty seamless, I think fits together, but I would not be supportive of using school aid funds for university costs.
Thank you. Ms. Guerrero-DeLuca, same question, please.
I was defeated, so, I mean, this question, you know, if it happens in the future, I guess, but it was defeated because it's a bad idea. No, you're not, I would not agree to take school funding from our public community colleges and technical schools for school aid fund. I wouldn't. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You need to keep your pot separate. Okay, so you need to find ways to fiscally fund your local education, and then you do the same for your local community colleges, your technical schools, and your higher education. And it becomes convoluted when you start saying, well, we're going to take a little bit here, we're going to put some over here, then we're going to take a little bit over here. Our education system is failing, and it's failing because we don't have the money to fund it. We want to blame everybody else out there. We want to blame teachers and school boards and administrators and so on. The problem is that there's not the funds needed to make sure schools are properly have the resources and have the, hopefully a school of choice question is going to come up because I have a whole bunch to say about that too. But no, I believe that you need to keep your funds separate. You need to ensure that there's transparency in each of these areas too.
Thank you. Next question to you, Mr. Howell. School districts are currently funded on a per pupil count without regard to differences in non-educational costs, such as transportation. Especially in rural counties such as Lapeer, districts pay a disproportionate amount for transportation costs because of their geographic size. Would you support separate funding for these additional costs?
I would have no trouble with making an accommodation for the rural districts. Having been president of the North Branch Board of Education, we have that exact problem with a very large district, a lot of transportation costs. But just be practical again. Remember, this is a constitutional amendment, and the legislature cannot change the Constitution. So it's got to go to vote of the people if you're going to change Proposal A, which is the equal payment per district. But we could supplement it, which the legislature could do, and I would be supportive of that concept.
Thank you. Ms. Guerrero de Luca, question, please.
Well, as I said, per pupil, we say that it was created to be equitable. It's not. I can show you. I can't obviously pull up the data because I guess I'm not allowed to do that. But I can show you school districts, and the equality is not there. There are school districts that are getting $7,000, some are getting $7,800, some are getting $8,100, and as I said, those hold harmless are getting $11,000 to $15,000. Okay, so the PA or the proposal A again, it's not equitable. Inequities are all over the place. Of course, it doesn't make sense that a school district with a 2-mile radius is getting the same amount of money that a school district that has 250 miles, like our Lapeer school district, 250 miles, and they're not even taking into account that we're driving back roads. We're driving, our buses need higher maintenance because we're driving on gravel and everything else while they're driving on concrete and blacktop. So the inequities are there already. Studies are being conducted right now to show that we need to start putting a formula together that takes into account these inequities of transportation, of students that need higher, that have more, what word am I looking for? Need more social workers and so on.
Thank you.
I thought that was my final.
Thank you.
So,
Ms. Pilker, same question, please.
yeah, I mean, again, it's like, the problem is that we've got the state government making it, and it's like, well, they're just going to put everybody in this general ed, class, but we don't. Not everybody needs. Some of us need. We need IEPs. We need individual education plans within our local communities, and that's why, we know our district. We know what the needs are, what the costs are, and we should just, if I were in Lansing, I would be trying to impress upon them, you guys, you need to take your claws out of this. You need to let people decide these things on their own. Because we're not there in their communities. We don't know what's going on, what their needs are, in Flint now, with all these children have lead poisoning, they're going to have a very different population there of children with different educational needs than what we have out here in Lapeer County. So, I mean, the state can't just, pass this blanket across the board plan for the whole state because it's not the same everywhere you go. So again, we need local control of our own education systems.
Thank you. Next question to you, Ms. Guerrero de Luca. Since the Great Recession, Lapeer County's workforce has been among the hardest hit in Michigan. In 2010, the local unemployment rate fell just was just at 20% approximately. Since then, the jobless rate here in Lapeer County has been consistently much higher than the state average. What role can school districts play in bringing more jobs to our communities?
Okay, so all those facts are absolutely correct. And again, as I've said this throughout all of these forums, we are an economically depressed county, and we've consistently been economically depressed for 50 years. Okay, we don't have the jobs. What can schools do? Well, it is great. I know we call it EdTech now, but VOTech. I am a proud graduate of VOTech. I was in sales and marketing. I did go on to get a 4-year degree at a college or university, but those 2 years that I spent at EdTech were valuable. It gave me insight to what I can expect in the business world. So yes, we should be working more closely with our school districts on the types of services that they're offering students. What they're giving students today, there are wonderful things. We're giving them the 2 years of college where they can come out debt-free with that associate's degree. That's phenomenal. That is great. So we need to keep having more conversations with our school boards, with our school administrators, bringing everybody into the fray and talking about what can we do that we're going to make our students, whether they choose to go on to 4-year degrees or not, if they choose to go into the job market immediately, how can we make them more successful? Oh, I'm sorry. Every time you hold up that 10 seconds, I think that's my stop. I'm so sorry. But anyways, yes, continue the conversations with them of how we can give the students the necessary training.
Thank you. Ms. Spilker, same question.
I guess I would approach this from the same perspective as I said with, what I do as a case manager doing coordination of care. I would try to encourage people to, make lists of resources, talk to people, communicate, find out who's looking for jobs, what sort of skills do you need, what can we do to try to train people to have those skills. But beyond that, this is outside of what the schools would do, but I would like to see things made in, changes made in Lansing where, you have to have a license for this, a license for that, and I think that people out here, like I used the analogy at the last forum, if a guy grew up, his dad was an electrician for 30 years, and he learned how to be an electrician from his dad, he shouldn't have to jump through hoops and, take tests or, whatever through the state. If you passed in college, then you have the education to do it, or if as long as you're practicing, you're open and honest about what your qualifications are, it's not up to the government to determine whether you can do business with that person. If, I say, okay, yeah, I've never went to electrician school, and you know that, but you know from the work that I've done around town that I know how to do the job, I should be allowed, the government shouldn't be preventing me from being able to work for you.
Thank you. Mr. Howell, please.
This is exactly the right question. Education equals jobs. Every study I've read shows that the higher the educational level is in a community, the higher the incomes are, the lower the unemployment is. Lapeer Community Schools has several innovative programs to try to boost our educational achievement. At EdTech, of course, where I've been on the board for all these years, we have just started, this is our first year of a new program where we're using a 3-year program to give a student a 2-year degree or 2 years toward their bachelor's degree. They go there in their junior year, their senior year, and 1 year, the 13th year, taking a combination of high school and college courses. At the end of that 3-year time frame, they've achieved that associate's or 2 years toward the bachelor's, and they have done it at no cost to them or their parents. That's the kind of innovative program we need. So many of our young people that are getting good educations are being crushed by debt. It's a real travesty in this country. We've got students coming out of school with $100,000 of school aid debt. That is a drag in our economy. That prevents economic growth. They can't invest in that first house. They can't do a number of things that would all be good for the economy beyond just the fact that they're going to qualify for good jobs. So I'm glad to have that question come up.
Thank you. Next question to you, Ms. Spilker. In the aftermath of several highly visible active shooter incidents in this country in recent years, Some have questioned the readiness of school districts to handle these types of security threats. What role, if any, do you think the state should play in securing schools from armed intruders?
I guess I would need a little more clarification, I guess, of what the person was thinking when they wrote that. It sounds to me, are they looking for, do I think that the state should fund security systems, or I don't know. Again, my answer is always going to be that we should handle it locally, that the state shouldn't be telling us what we choose, how we want our schools. There could be two different schools in the same city where the parents are like, hey, I don't want guns in my schools. I want, the doors to be locked or whatever. And then maybe over here, people who are much more, pro-gun rights, who feel like I don't have a problem with there being, an armed security guard or the teacher having a gun in the room or whatever. I mean, I think that we should have the choice amongst ourselves to make those decisions individually. My answer is always going to be that we shouldn't put it in the hands of the government. We need to handle these things within our own community, use our own heads, put them together, and come to decisions ourselves, rather than turning to the government to solve all our problems for us.
Mr. Holliston, question, please.
This is not a gun rights question. This is a safety question. And it is a very severe safety question. Anybody that read the Detroit Free Press a couple of days ago saw that they picked up an individual in Dearborn charged with terrorism who was plotting to commit mass murder. Happily, they caught him before he did it. And one of his quotes when they picked him up was that he planned to shoot up a very large church congregation nearby, and he was going to do that, quote, because he knows there's no guns in church. That's the problem we have in schools. These people don't have fear. I think we're going to need to have some state appropriations to provide assistance for guards in schools. I'm absolutely opposed to further unfunded mandates. I don't want us just to pass another law that says you shall provide guards. If we're going to do this, we're going to have to provide funding to follow the problem. But I don't see any other way we can really protect in these appropriate situations, short of having a police officer available at a school site.
Thank you. Ms. Guerrero De Luca, please.
Well, I want to first start off, though, that there's more legislation coming. There's current bills being created or being passed right now to remove gun-free zones altogether. So they just want to do away with gun-free zones altogether. Schools, churches, bars, sporting arenas, they want to just do away with guns. And now a new bill is being created by a senator that he doesn't even want training for CPL holders. He just thinks that it's constitutional carry. Anybody should be able to carry with no licensing, no training, etc. So that's what's coming down to us, and it will affect our schools. We've seen it already. Put your money where your mouth is, though. The schools, the state keeps saying that yes, our children are valuable, and yes, we should protect them, and yes, but we're not going to give you the resources to do it. That's ridiculous. Yes, state appropriations should be set aside directly in school budgets, strictly for safety. Emily City, we're blessed. My husband, as I said, has been the school liaison officer for the last 24 years. Emily City Districts knows the importance of having a school liaison officer in their buildings. So each school district should be able to work with their local community policing to pay for that police officer, but every school district should have a school liaison officer, if not more, if not 2, 3.
Thank you. Next question to you, Mr. Howell. The expansion of charter schools has changed the face of schools of choice here in Michigan over the last decade. Many contend that charter schools should not be publicly funded at the same level as traditional public schools because they do not compete on a level playing field. Many operate on less expensive K-8 structures. Some do not offer transportation or special education services to students. Are you in favor of continuing to fund charter schools in the same manner?
Yes. We have an excellent charter school here in Lapeer County at Chatfield. They do a wonderful job educating young people. We must not forget that charter schools are public schools, and they need to work in partnership with the local schools. Chatfield works very well with the other 5 districts in the county. They cooperate on a number of levels. You want to remember, too, that while they get the foundation grant, they do not have access to funding for buildings. Like those of us in North Branch, we have villages that have paid for a very large building program. Charter schools have to take whatever building expense they're going to have out of that foundation grant. So they're actually funded at a lesser rate already because they've got to find the building costs out of their foundation grant. But I do not believe we should discriminate against the charter schools.
Thank you. Ms. Farrell, the same question, please.
The history of charter schools were created because the theory was supposed to be that these charter schools would try these innovative ways of thinking and teaching, and then we would pass it down to public schools. That's what they were there for. They were going to be the incubator to create this innovative ways that we could pass it to everybody else. That didn't happen. Okay, under Governor Snyder's leadership, Michigan has now the most charter schools in the entire nation. And when we're talking about charter schools, yeah, we're lucky we have Chatfield, which is a nonprofit charter. Our state has gone crazy with these for-profit charters. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, whatever. I don't know what taxpayer is okay with our tax dollars going to for-profit corporations. Check out Muskegon Heights. Their EM sold their school district to a for-profit charter school. The charter company felt they weren't getting enough money. They closed the doors. They don't have to have no accountability to the community. So then, in order to get another charter school to come into that district, the state had to offer up a huge balanced calendar grant in order to entice another for-profit charter school. Again, this is taking away money from our public schools.
Thank you. Ms. Spilker?
Again, the problem is that the state is trying to run things for the entire state. You know, they're so far away, and there's so many differences between different communities. You know, so they don't know what's best. You know, they can't determine our lives. They don't know. You know, we should be able to decide how we want to do. And then also with different minds, different people, different perspectives. You know, that's where the innovation comes from. Rather than this small group of people, just this is how we're going to do it, and then they pass it along to everybody else, and you've got to follow by these rules, and you're, you know, confined to work within the script that they give you. I mean, so again, I would rather see the tax dollars not even come out of our pockets in the first place. We keep them here locally and decide amongst ourselves in our own communities how we want to spend our money and shape our own schools and education systems.
Thank you. Mr. Luca, or the next question to you. A lot has been made in recent years about state and federal regulations on food services within our schools. Do you agree with policies that either ban or place limitations on the sale of certain soft drinks, candy, and other unhealthy snacks in favor of healthier food choices within our schools?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure,
One time.
why not?
I'm trying to understand. Okay.
A lot has been made in recent years about state and federal regulations on food services within schools. Do you agree with policies that would either ban or place limitations on the sale of soft drinks, candy, and other unhealthy snacks in favor of healthier food choices?
Okay. We all want our children to eat better. Okay. I have a 7 and an 8-year-old. For the first 4 years, I chose to go out and buy them organic food because I was that mom and I wanted that. Do we need to place limitations into our local school districts if the Girl Scouts want to have a fundraiser and they want to go ahead and sell their candy or their cookies or whatever on property, and we, due to limitations, cannot allow that? No, I don't think that should be the case. I think, again, it goes down to common sense and local control. The local elected officials should be able to make that determination of what they want in their schools. I don't think any school board member or teacher or administrator would want to have nothing but candy and pop and all this other stuff available to our children. But should it be something that the state comes in and says you can or cannot do? No, absolutely not. Again, it should be local control. They should determine what they have in their schools.
Ms. Spilker?
Basically the same thing there. I mean, I am that mom still now that I shop organic, you know, I'm all about the farmer's market and whatever. But I think that just because I think that's how I want my children to eat, that everybody else has to do it the same way? No. Do I think that the state or the federal government should come in and mandate what should be on our kids' plates? No. I think that within our own communities, if that's a concern, and you know, then that's what we work towards. You know, we have our own ideas and beliefs, and if we can choose to be conscientious about it, which I think obviously in an area like this where there's so many people that have their own farms and whatever, yes, we want our kids to eat vegetables and eat healthy or whatever, but do I want to be told that, no, sorry, your kid can't bring cupcakes for his birthday? You know, no, we're not going to toss candy at the homecoming parade, you know? I mean, it's ridiculous, you know?
Mr. Howell?
There's been several examples of the silliness of this thing. And I'm certainly opposed to federal or state mandates about what should be appearing in our vending machines or on our school lunch menus. You know, Michelle Obama has been on a kick, and it's come down through the federal government on all these kind of regulations. And I think it's just totally inappropriate. If they want to achieve this by setting an example, by preaching to us, whatever, that's wonderful. But as far as setting a federal regulation, if you go to your food service manager in your local district, you'll find them having an extremely challenging time to develop the menus right now. I know that's the case in North Branch, where they have to really struggle to come up with exactly the right proportions to meet all of these federal mandates. It makes their jobs much more difficult.
Thank you. Next question to you, Ms. Spilker. Should standardized tests, SAT, ACT, MSTEP, etc., continue to be used as a measurement of student achievement and an important part of college admission? And further, should teachers receive merit-based raises as a result of how their students do on these tests?
That's hard for me to give a simple answer to that. I do have a problem with the schools being pressured to teach to the test. You know, that they've got to know this, they got to know this, these specific things. And just because a kid can perform well on a multiple choice test doesn't necessarily mean that he can think and reason. And I see, you know, it makes me think of, I went to my kid's Halloween party this year, and there was like all these different stations set up, and the teacher sets the timer for like 6 or 8 minutes, and it's like, okay, go, do this craft, and play this game, and then there's the food table, and it's like, hurry up, go, 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 go. And it's basically, because of the standardized testing, it's created this environment where it's so regimented this is a difficult question for me to answer, that it's not conducive to the actual learning process. And so, merit-based, just because of multiple choice tests, I think it's a little more complex than that. I can't answer that in a short manner. That's where I would really get into the behavioral psychology there for everyone. But.
Thank you. Mr. Howell, same question, please.
Yes. Let's separate out what we can do and what we can't do. I'm running for state representative, a member of the Michigan legislature. I will have zero control over what our colleges use for admission tests, so that part of the question is irrelevant to what I'm running for. I do believe there needs to be some kind of statewide standardized test, otherwise you got no measurement between districts. Now, I am not a professional educator. I don't pretend to tell you which test is the best, but I certainly think there has to be a test that is spread across the state in order to compare districts. The more interesting question, though, is merit-based pay. I'm very much in favor of that. I have seen a lot of very, very good teachers in my years on boards of education, and it's always frustrated me that we were not allowed to give those very good teachers a pay increase because of the lockstep of the union contract. Whether the teacher was outstanding, adequate, or even somewhat mediocre, if they were there, they had to have exactly the same pay. There was no financial incentive. So while I'm not in favor of just using a test score for merit-based pay, might be a component, but I would love to have us take a serious look at rewarding extra good teachers, extra professional teachers in some way.
Thank you. Ms. Guerrero De Luca, same question, please.
All right, well, I think all teachers should be given a pay raise immediately. Anyways, but as part of this merit-based pay, you know, I understand the whole with what Mr. Howell just mentioned about the steps in the union and so on. But the merit-based, when you look at it, it creates competition, and we really need cooperation. So we have to look at how we are, we should be able to award teachers that are doing outstanding, but I'm not sure if it's tied in with the merit based on the testing. Because I'll give you an example. I used to be a recruiter for Pressure Financial. It was another job that I did with the company. And I had to, every person that I wanted to interview, I had to give them a testing first. And we did the test, and I will tell you, every time my data came back that the people that were EL learners, secondary, English was their secondary language, didn't matter if it was Spanish, German, Chinese, you name it, they failed the test. They just did not pass. They could have been the most qualified candidate, and they didn't. So standardized testing to continue to measure, yes, we do need metrics. We need metrics. How we're going about doing it right now, M-STEP was taken last year in the LAC school district. We're still waiting for our state measurements. So the state says it's very important to us. We're still waiting for that.
Thank you. Next question to you, Mr. Howell. With continued advancements in technology, how do you see the role of technology changing in the classroom experience now and in the future?
I'm not sure I'm the right expert for that question, but clearly technology is driving a lot of change in our school district. And we're probably going to have more distance learning. We're going to have more availability of college courses online. A lot of things are going to be having to change, but I don't think you're ever going to want to get away from the fundamental classroom. I think to really teach, there needs to be that relationship between a good educator and their students. Technology can enhance things a lot, it can help the educational process, it can have lots of good effects, but I would not want it to advance to the point where we take the teacher out of the equation. There has to be that one person there that can really motivate a student to do their level best.
Thank you. Ms. Guerrero De Luca, same question, please.
Yeah, well, we do need to make sure our technology is changing at the same rapid rate as the rest of the global economy, because we are falling behind with that. How we come about that? Well, one, we really, again, it comes back to funding for our schools, because most school districts have 1 or 2 computer labs, and they're all being eaten up by taking all these standardized testing, so that you can't even take your classroom for just normal technology training into the computer labs, because the computer labs are being used for standardized testing. So we need to ensure that our kids are learning technology from our teachers. Definitely would never talk about replacing teachers with technology, but we need to come up with ways that we are making sure our kids are global and are ready for the global economy. Working for a Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 company, you need that in your resume. So we need to make sure that we're funding it so that these kids are, we do have robotics in our school districts. We do have all these other additional resources that kids can go to who are interested in that arena. Not everybody is a techie. I'm not a techie. But there are people that's the line of work they want to get into, and we need to make sure we have the resources in our local schools available for them so that they can go and they can expand their interest and their knowledge base in order to better prepare them for whatever line of field they want to go into. But it comes down to, again, making sure that there's enough money in the school district that we can actually put towards technology.
Thank you. Ms. Spilker, same question, please.
I am a huge fan of technology. I think that and it's so imperative that we educate our children, have them, used to, they already are, whether we want them to be or not. I think everybody knows a 2-year-old or 3-year-old that can use an iPad better than you can. So I think it's really imperative that we expose children to technology. That's the pace that our world is moving at these days. And absolutely no, I wouldn't want to replace a teacher with technology, because you need that human interaction. But we need to, as much as possible, get technology into our classrooms. And again, that's what can come from the diversity of being able to create our own school systems and structures and, the innovation of different ideas and see what works and what doesn't, rather than just being told by the state, this is the way it's got to go. But it's imperative in the day and age that we live in. I mean, they already say that, within a few years, a lot of the jobs that we have will be replaced by technology. We already see it at McDonald's and whatnot. They're, these people demanding a higher minimum wage are now being replaced by a touchscreen computer where, you just go up and put in your order yourself. So technology is the way of the future. So we absolutely need to pass it on to our children as much as possible.
Thank you. Next question to you, Ms. Guerrero DeLuca. Because no two students learn in the same way, many school districts have gone to great lengths to offer innovative options for students at all levels. Are you in favor of expanding choices in education for non-traditional programs like virtual learning, homeschool partnerships, and year-round calendars?
Well, my children are on a balanced calendar. In Liz City, we went 2 years ago to a balanced calendar. Right now, we only have one grade level, first through kindergarten through 5th grade, and it's outstanding. My kids love it. They truly do. They enjoy the balanced calendar. Again, it's giving those parents a choice. It's a choice. So yes, choices are always good. When you can have a choice of how you want to educate your child, then most definitely. The second part of the question was
in regards to virtual learning, homeschool
okay.
partnerships, things of that nature.
Okay. Virtual learning, I will let you know, I'm very hesitant on virtual learning. I understand that it sounds great that, it's virtual learning, and I don't lump virtual learning in with technology, because a lot of it is where you are in front of a computer and you're learning off that computer rather than having the human interaction with the teacher. So I think the human interaction is the main component that the child walks away from of what they've learned for the day, when they can come home and tell you what their teacher taught them that day. So I'm kind of skeptical on the virtual learning portion of sitting somebody down in front of a computer for 3 hours and they're supposed to retain that and walk away with that. So I need to research that more. But the other choices, again, as a parent, it's your option to choose. If you want to homeschool your child and you feel that you're equipped to do it, then that is your option.
Thank you. Ms. Bilker, same question, please.
I'm for liberty and freedom, and I want people to be able to run their own lives and make those choices. Personally, from my own experience, what I've seen a lot of kids try the virtual learning and it doesn't go so well, but I don't think that doesn't mean people shouldn't have that option available to them, because there are some children, particularly more like adolescents, that are very self-directed and they do better in that environment on their own. But I don't want to restrict anybody's choices and what availabilities or ways that we can go about doing things are out there. I think that we should have the freedom to choose and see what works. And, you see somebody over there, hey, this guy, he tried this new idea and it's working great. I think I'm going to try that, rather than just being, having our options limited.
Thank you. Mr. Howell, same question.
All of these things you talk about have merit. One general comment I'd like to make is, it's really not up to us on most of these things. The legislature should not be interfering with local education to the degree it has been. We are not all seeing. For me to go to Lansing and sit there and vote to change your balanced calendar or virtual learning or homeschooling, I really don't know enough. I think the local districts ought to make all these decisions. All these have merit. In the homeschool situation, at the Ed Tech, we have a partnership with a number of homeschool students. Matter of fact, some of our very best students have been homeschooled young people who have come and taken one of our technical classes for a half a day. And I know the local districts have similar programs. I think that's absolutely a great concept. But all of this should really not be a legislative matter. It ought to be left to the local district to decide how to incorporate these concepts into their curriculum.
Thank you. Next question to you, Ms. Bilker. There is widespread belief that to prepare students for jobs of the future, we, must renew our focus on science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM. What do you think you can do as a state legislature to support those initiatives here in Lapeer County?
Wow. I mean, I would go there and I would fight for the freedom for us to enact things ourselves and do things here at home, rather than, jump through the hurdles and the red tape of having them pass things down to us. Again, I would be up there fighting for us to have the choice to enact whatever we want locally, and work with different, programs to bring things into our communities. I mean, it's a matter of getting the community involved, educating, doing research, finding what resources are available. Like I said, I would approach it from the same perspective of, getting everyone involved and working together. I would turn to you guys constantly asking you, what do you think? What are your ideas? What do you want me to go tell these guys? I wouldn't be some far away, from my understanding, they're up there Tuesday through Thursday, they're in session Monday and Friday. If it was allowed, I'd be down here talking to you guys rather than sitting up in some office in Lansing, far away from you guys. I would be in the community finding out what do you guys want me to do.
Thank you. Mr. Howell?
The whole STEM initiative is a great thing. At the Ed Tech program I mentioned, we are oriented on a STEM curriculum because we want to encourage that kind of thing. But let's remember that we have to have choices. As somebody who studied government and agricultural economics, I don't think everybody is destined to go into mathematics and science. We need to make sure we're not shortchanging the other disciplines. But we can certainly do things on a local level to encourage these programs. But again, Lansing should not be dictating to the local districts their curriculum or their programs. This needs to be decided by educational professionals, not by legislators.
Thank you. Ms. Guerrero De Luca, same question, please.
Okay. First of all, STEM should be available to those who want it. But in utopia, I would sit here and say, yes, you're right. State should not be involved in local education. But that's not the case. It's not the case. The state is involved in local education, and you need a state rep that's going to go there and lessen the negative impact that is happening to our local school districts. So yes, it's great to say that it should not be. You're right, it shouldn't be. But it's not going to happen. In a utopia, we have our state school board who would be directly talking with our local school districts. That's utopia. Our state is involved. So we need a state rep like me who understands education, who's going to go and lessen these negative decisions, to lessen the decisions that are being making and lessen the negative impact that it's having on our local school districts. Choices are all great. Yes, you should have STEM available for those students who want it, who want that additional training and resource. But again, we have to talk about what we're in today. The state is involved and they're making poor choices currently. And right now, we all heard power corrupts. Right now, the state, the Senate, and the governor are all under the Republican control. So when you have one group that's overholding everything, it does corrupt. Total control does corrupt. And we need other people's voices in there that can go against that.
Thank you. Next question to you, Mr. Howell. Since becoming state superintendent of schools last year, Ryan Woodson has been touring the state, seeking out input to flesh out his goal of making the state of Michigan a top 10 state for education in the next 10 years. If you had his ear, what would be the main recommendation you would give to him to achieve that goal?
We need to improve education across the board. And he has taken on a very challenging task to move us to the top 10. God bless him, and I hope he can accomplish that. But it's a very challenging goal. We need to deal with this from the pre-kindergarten level all the way up to the university graduate degree level to really achieve what he's talking about. And part of it is funding, but a lot of it is bureaucratic requirements that are dragging down our districts. An unbelievable amount of time is spent by local districts in record keeping and filing reports with the Department of Education, which he heads. if he could reduce a lot of that burden, that would help get more resources into the classroom. But fundamentally, I think the problem he's going to run up against is funding, as has been mentioned a number of times tonight. And we've only got so big an economic pie. We just need to put more of our resources into education and make sure that they're used effectively.
Thank you. Ms. Guerrero De Luca, same question, please.
If I was sitting down having coffee with him, I would tell him the first thing is listen to your teachers, your educators. Listen to what they're saying. They're the ones in the classroom. Ignore the legislatures in Lansing. Ignore them. Just remove them from your conversation. So whatever goal that you're trying to achieve, if you can remove the state from as much of it as possible, do so. Talk to your teachers, talk to your school boards, talk to your school administrators. They're the ones that are in the thick of it. They're the ones dealing with it every day. When I was a process manager, again, I had several jobs in Chrysler Financial. I was a process specialist. When I would have to go into departments to analyze them and come up with ways to improve them, the person I always went to talk to was the person doing the job. I did eventually have to talk to the supervisors and the managers and the vice presidents, but I would first go to the person doing the job because they were the honest ones, telling me what is truly happening, how many reports they're doing 3 different ways that they could really do it in one way. So go I would tell him, talk to the people that are doing the jobs. Go into the classroom, do field studies, walk in, see what's happening to the school districts. Please check out my Facebook page. You can see what my interaction with Phil Pavlov on education just a couple Fridays ago, and see how our state legislators are viewing our schools or not viewing them. Didn't even want to go into the school. He didn't even want to go into the school district. Didn't want to substitute for a day so he could get a true understanding.
I give Mr. Pavlov 30 seconds, but he's not here. Ms. Filter?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that, that was one thing, for instance, when I worked for the state government and Snyder got elected, he came through and he started sending, Maura Corrigan was the director at DHS at the time, and had the directors go around and get to know the workers and what's the problems, and they did, the very thing that you're talking about is that they started to remove some of those things where we had to go through this avenue and that avenue and talk to this person, get their approval, and file multiple reports. I definitely would advocate that as well. But I would also look at, the government looking at new ways to, one, lessen restrictions, lessen interference in our lives, and the ways that they actually, the things that they do that hamper our ability to generate economic revenue. There's a lot of legislation out there that just, more people would be to work or functioning in society if there wasn't so much government interference in their lives.
Thank you. Next question to you, Ms. Guerrero De Luca. As has been indicated earlier, there's a lot of unfunded mandates out there. One of those is the Michigan Public School Employee Retirement System. Currently, it sucks up approximately, according to this question, 33% of the budget of many school districts. Putting that aside, what would you do now or in the future to fund that and assure stable funding and pension to allow good teachers to come back into education for people who aren't because of the problems with pensions and fundings and salaries?
Well, what I'm going to do is remove privatization. I would take the privatization away back from our bus drivers and back from our custodians and back from the cooks. What happens is when you have this lump of people that are all paying into this system, and all of a sudden you remove a big group because you privatize them. So I took the bus drivers and I privatize them. I take the line cooks and I privatize them. I take the custodians and I privatize them. Now you've removed all of these people from this pool that were all paying into these retirement pensions. So you had this great pool paying for the retirement pension that you start siphoning out these individuals, while these other individuals are now having to be forced to pay for the legacy cost of all. So that's the first thing I would do. I would recommend removing the privatization, putting people back into the pool so that everybody is a greater pool, a greater amount of money that's going into those to cut the legacy costs. Unfunded mandates. That was part of the question, right?
Yes. Well, in regards to the retirement.
Oh, okay.
How do you attract new teachers? If there's a problem with pensions, retirement, salary?
Pensions is not the only problem that's causing teachers to flee. We need to deal with all the other issues that the teachers are causing. Pension is just one portion of it. We need to talk about health insurance, we need to talk about morale, we need to talk about all of those other things. Pension is one portion of the piece of the pie that's making our teachers flee. And if we don't do something quickly, all of our great teachers will be gone.
Thank you. Ms. Stoker?
See, I would go kind of the opposite direction. I think that we all should be in control of our own retirement money, and you know, I would privatize everything, and instead of turning to the government to, you know, you have to provide this for me, you have to provide that for me, you know, I would rather just have that money in our own pockets, our own control, and that we seek out our own health insurance or our own, or lack thereof for that matter, or, you know, our own pension funds or IRAs, 401ks, 457s, whatever. You know, the problem is, like she said, you know, the population is never going to stay the same, okay? And that's sort of like, for instance, look at China or what we have with Social Security, you know, the way they fund it is that, okay, these people are going to go along but the people that are paying into it now, they're to paying to fund people that have already retired, and then when the people who have retired balloons, you know, then there's not enough people, so they have to take more. It's not going to be stable. So that's why each person should be funding their own retirement in whatever fund they seek to put into, rather than having it handled for us by the government.
Mr. Howell?
To begin with, the 33% is not an accurate number. It's substantial, but it's not that high. It's a very significant number. And while I am not in favor of the legislature dictating to local school districts on most items, this is a place where the legislature has a responsibility. This pension plan system was not created by the local districts. This pension plan system was created by the Michigan State Legislature. So they cannot hide from responsibility on this. And what they've got to do, what they've been doing to a limited degree, but needs to be done to a greater degree, is they have got to appropriate the money it takes to fund these pensions that have been guaranteed to the teachers. They've worked their years, they deserve their pension, the legislature has to step up to the plate, fund that. That in turn will make more dollars available to the local districts to spend directly on education.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I pretty much exhausted the 19 questions that I had up here. Many of them were a little bit of repeats. Does anybody have any 3x5 cards that I can ask any additional? Not that you have to, but if you have a card, I'd like to take a look at it. Mr. Wander can look at it and certainly ask a question. Anybody have any? Yeah, hold them up. There's some blank ones up there at the tables, please. Starting with you, Ms. Filker, how do we reach those parents of those students who need help? And on this question, those is underlined.
Those who need help. I mean, I think that, you know, we can make our efforts. We can go out, we can try to set a good example and impress upon people and teach some things. Because people would be, you know, people talk a lot about common sense, but common sense is not that common. And really, you'd be surprised what people don't know. That they don't understand. It's never occurred to them. They've lived very different lives than you. I struggle with the government going out and saying that, you know, we're going to go do this. I think the people, out of the goodness of your own hearts, we should absolutely try to reach out to those families and say, what can I do to, you know, what are you struggling with? You know, let's create a plan. Let's set goals. How are we going to measure this? We're going to, you know, find research, local resources, build your support system, you know. But ultimately what it comes down to is personal responsibility. And if those parents don't want to, you know, prioritize their children's futures, then that's on them. I mean, you can't save everybody. You can try, but it's ultimately their life and their choice. So.
Same question to you, Mr. Howell.
This is one of the great frustrations in education. Teachers are faced with a far different set of circumstances now than they were a few decades ago. When I went to school, virtually every child came from a two-parent family. They all came from a fairly stable environment by and large. Now you have a much more challenging situation. A lot more children are coming in without good family backgrounds, without the kind of guidance they need at home, without the kind of encouragement they need at home. It's made teachers' jobs much, much more difficult than they used to be. Probably the best we can do as schools is to reach out. We have the Early On program where we identify very young kids that will need extra assistance going forward. We reach out to those families and provide the assistance. But you can't be everywhere, and fundamentally, the schools are not social workers by and large. We do the best we can, but you can only do so much. So I really don't know the full answer to your question. It's a combination of the schools, the social welfare agencies, the churches, the community.
Very good. Mrs. Guerrero de Luca?
I had a revelation the other night because when I saw, the teachers always have binders and the kids are responsible to bring the binders back, and you're supposed to check to make sure the parents sign the binders, that they went through the homework with them the night before, and the binders are signed, and everything's copacetic. I talked to a mom, and it's easy to say, darn it, why is this kid binders not signed, the homework's still in there, hasn't even been, doesn't do the required 20-minute reading, and so on. And it's easy to want to shame that parent. And then I talked to a single mom the other night, and she brought me to tears because she said, Margaret, I have 2 jobs. I'm a single mom. I have 2 children. I have 2 jobs that I'm working because both are minimum wage. So I have to have 2 jobs. I come home exhausted. I do not have time to check binders and to read and to do homework. And she says, and I know I feel horrible about it. I feel guilty. I'm slacking as a parent, but I'm out there working 2 jobs to put the roof over our heads, to pay for our rent and to pay for food and so on. So it's this double-edged sword. It's easy to look at these kids that are coming back with their binders not signed and say, come on, parents, step up. Step up, do your job as a parent. Why did you have a child if you don't have time? But then you have to be empathetic and look at these individuals who are trying their very best. And it's tough for them to sit down and do homework and do the reading that they're supposed to do with little Johnny each night because there's just no time in the day.
Thank you. Next question to you, Mr. Howell. Many of you have spoken throughout the evening about increased funding for many programs. How would you propose to pay for this increased funding, if you've advocated that?
I don't think I've advocated a lot of that. I did advocate that we should give some extra money for the bus transportation concern and a couple other items. Fundamentally, I am not in favor of any significant tax increases. And that's what it's going to come down to. If you want a lot more money, there's only 2 ways to do it. You either raise taxes or you reallocate money within the budget. I am not going to be voting for any significant tax increases. I am an advocate of reallocating money within the budget. I don't think we are spending our money wisely. There's a lot more money going to corrections that ought to be going to more worthwhile things, more effective things. There's other areas of the budget that are also in need of cutbacks. But it would be a reallocation, from my point of view, not a large tax increase.
Ms. Guerrero de Luca?
And as I said, my background is finance. And how I would do it is you have to go in and look at the current ways that you are funding it. Prop A does need reform. It worked in 1994, and it might have worked up until 10 years ago, but it's not working now. In 2007, when we went into our Great Recession, property taxes dropped and people's spending habits dropped, money wasn't being fed into the sales tax and into the property taxes, and schools weren't being given the revenue the way it was intended. So it needs reform. Creating new formulas, thinking outside the box and coming up with a formula that you can incorporate the inequities that are happening out there. Your transportation, as I mentioned, and your special needs children, and so on. You have to be willing to think outside the box. You can't just go in and say that. And trust me, I heard it. When I was mayor of Emily City, I used to have commissioners saying, we've done it this way, why do we need to change anything? We've done it this way, there's no need to change. Change is good. Progress is good. So you need to go in and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. But you look at it and you study it and you go line item by line item. And even if you have to work over your summer break and your winter break, you go over it line item by find better ways to fund it, smarter ways. Oh, so again, you have to review Prop A, you have to create a new formula. Those are the ways that you fund schools properly. You can't keep going back the way that we used to do it.
Thank you. Ms. Spilker?
Well, basically, my entire point is sort of like she said, that things are never enacted or put to use the way that it was intended. It never gets done the way that they say they're going to do it. And it's because they've taken on, they've bitten off way more than they can chew up there. People stopped and thought about all the different areas, not just education, but just so many facets of our lives. That the government is, controlling this and running this, and there's legislation on top of legislation, and regulation on top of regulation, and exception to this and exception to that, and it's just so inefficient. And that's why I'm wholly in favor of, in whatever way possible, localizing things, motivating people in our own communities, getting involved, and just doing things for ourselves, and I go to Lansing and fight to get us the freedom to do that for ourselves.
Thank you. Many of the questions that I have here are talking about transparency in government and the state legislature, things of that nature. There's a couple in here which appear to be somewhat negative towards prior state reps and things of that nature, which appears to be not really adequate and not really appropriate. And again, there's just a general question about the adequacy of minimum wage, transparency. Many of those questions were covered at the general forum at the Tea Party in regards to use of FOIA and things of that nature. Believe it or not, the candidates have answered at least 18 times individually have stood up besides their opening statements. It is now almost 7:30, so I have those questions here. Any of those people want to speak to the individual candidates, they've indicated they're more than happy to stay after. But I think this is a good opportunity to let them do their closing statements. They're 3 minutes long, so it should take some time, starting with you, Mr. Howell.
Thank you. This election, like every election, is about the future. We've gone through a very difficult period in Lapeer County's history. I don't need to recount the situation with our former representative, but the net result has been a loss of standing, a loss of respect in Lansing for our community, and a loss of representation. We have been essentially not represented now for over a year. It's time to make the change. I'm stepping forward to do that. I pledge to you that I'm going to bring back dignity, responsibility, and hard work to the office of state representative. I've been very fortunate in my life. I am retired. The law profession, my farm, my family have all been very good to me. We're financially comfortable, we're retired. I do not need this job. I am running for it because I want to provide a service back to the community that has done so much for my family and for myself. I look forward to providing that service to the community. And one thing along those lines is that because of my situation, I am 68 years old. I am not going to be running for any other political office other than state representative. I can serve approximately 7 years in that role if the voters elect and re-elect me. That will be the entire political career for me. I'll be retired after that point. The value of that is that Lansing has nothing to offer me, nothing to bribe me with, nothing to give me an incentive not to do the right thing. All of you that watch government know what happens in Lansing and in Washington. The lobbyists are there. The administrative officials are there. The caucuses are there. There's all kinds of forces pushing on legislators. And if that legislator is concerned about his step up the political ladder to the Senate or some other job, or he's concerned about being appointed by the governor to the tax tribunal or some other comfortable position, or he wants to get hired to be a lobbyist in Lansing, which a lot of them seem to retire to do. I want none of that. And because I want none of that, I can do exactly what I believe is right for the people of Lapeer County. I owe nothing to anybody else other than the voters who will hopefully send me to Lansing. I will do a good job for you. I pledge that, and I look forward to it.
Ms. Spilker, 3 minutes.
Well, Judge Holoka mentioned transparency, and Gary here mentioned, you know, the caucuses, and one of the reasons I feel you should vote for me is because I'm a libertarian, okay? Unlike the Republicans and the Democrats, you know, right now there's an exemption to the rules where they can caucus in private. They don't have to let anybody know what they talk about, and what happens is they go in there and they say, listen guys, this is the way we're gonna vote. I don't care if your local constituency doesn't want you to vote that way, this is the way the party's gonna vote. So if they go in there and if they have the choice between betraying you guys or betraying the party, and if they betray the party and vote in favor of how you guys want them to vote, then they're gonna take away their funding, they're not gonna be the head of this committee anymore, blah, 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 they blackball them. But as a libertarian, my party supports me. They want me to fight for your individual rights. They want me to go to Lansing and say, you know, like I said at the last forum, I don't want to go to Lansing so that I can have the opportunity to try to run your lives for you. I want to go to Lansing so I can fight for your right to run your lives for yourself. You know, and I would ask you guys that if I were elected representative, I want you to hunt me down and hold me accountable. I want you to call me out. I want to hear what you guys think and how you feel. I want those ideas. You know, I want to be able to express these thoughts and these feelings to those guys up in Lansing and say, wait a minute, you don't recognize how you're affecting people's lives.
Thank you. 3 minutes, Ms. Guerrero.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm proud that I'm endorsed by both the MEA and AFT unions. And just want to say, you've heard all of us speak tonight, and you've heard the great points that each of us have made on various issues. However, there are a few differences between myself and them. And first, I'm a fighter, as you've seen tonight. I don't back down. And this rubber stamping issues that both the individuals mentioned, I question everything. Anyone who knows me personally knows I question everything. I will not be a rubber stamp on my party. I will vote against my party if it's going to hurt the people that I represent, period. I'm not saying I'm a magician. I'm not saying that I can snap my fingers and I can take away all of our county and state's woes. I'm not saying that. But I do know, without hesitation, that I am the most qualified candidate to represent the people of Lapeer County. I've studied these issues for the last 2.5 years. I know what needs to be accomplished in order to bring relief to our students and our families and our seniors and our veterans. In addition to that, I bring fairness and cooperation. I'm willing to work across the party, across the aisle, to get things done, finding common ground that we need in Lansing. I bring transparency that we need in our government, cooperation, problem solving. But it's up to you, the voters, to choose who you think is going to best represent your interests in Lansing. But I challenge you to keep this in mind. Lapeer County has consistently been represented by a Republican state rep, and look where we're at today. Under the right leadership, our county can be so much more. But I want to share a story with you. At the end of last week's forum, I was approached by a woman, and she came up to me and she said, Margaret, I agreed with almost every point that you made. But then she said, I just wish you were a Republican. This way of thinking, in my opinion, has perpetuated our county's shortcomings. But now we're at a chance that we can make that change. We can look progressively down the road to how we can improve the lives of the families in Lapeer County. How we can put our money where our mouth is and set aside the rubber stamping and the political stances and all of this other gibberish that we're seeing going on out there. So, as I leave you tonight, I want you to think about these last few words. I want you to think different, vote different, and vote for Margaret Guerrero DeLuca on March 8th. Thank you. God bless.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Lapeer Community Schools for providing this lovely facility for us. I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank the candidates for being here. And again, those people who think I'm unfair, the questions that you wrote, I'm going to give them to the candidates. If you want to come up and ask them, the candidates can have them. And if they want to address attacking public, whatever it says, you can read it. If you want to answer, you can certainly answer it. Make sure you're careful driving home. Thank you very much for coming.